Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to another video. And this would be part 3 working on our the F-51D Mustang. So let's just start right now, shall we? I've done a little bit in the last week or so since my last video, since part 2. Did a little bit of research, did a little bit of painting, did a little bit of thinking. Yeah, a bunch of different stuff. So, you guys remember we got the engine assembled last time, okay? And I'll switch the camera here and we'll see if you can see the details that I've added to this little guy. I need to do this, and we'll do this, and we will do this, okay? And I'll change the camera here, okay? So I added all the little silver bolt heads, as you can see on there. Tons and tons of them on the oil pan there, everything all around the supercharger there. They're all the way around. Looking at reference photos of this engine, when these things are brand new, that's basically it. All those bolts are really shiny and everything like that. And yeah, so I did all that detail on there, got all those painted, right, just like that. Actually, you might think, oh, that must have taken a really long time, but it actually didn't take me all that long. Maybe about 15 minutes or so. It's just a very tiny little brush, just little dots on each one. It's pretty easy. Got that done. Then we have our oil tank here. You guys watched me spray paint this last time with the green zinc chromate color. But the keen eye would notice this is not green zinc chromate. This is yellow zinc chromate. And why did I do that? Well, looking at reference photos and all this stuff and reading as much as I could online in my spare time, trying to figure out what color to actually use for the primer color. I've since learned that it seems that they wanted to have 2 coats of the chromate, and so what they did was they would first primer it in the yellow chromate color. And then, in order to be able to easily tell that it had a second coat on it, they would add some black to it. And that black color, of course, turned it green. And so it would go from this color to this color. So you've got yellow and green chromate. Bing. And so they did that. And of course, depending on where the plane was assembled and where it was going, would depend on whether the thing had yellow or whether it had green. If they had a bunch of green left over, they'd paint that. If they had a bunch of yellow, they'd paint it with that. And so you got so many variations all over the place. So basically, whatever one you want to use, it's going to be right. Pretty much. So it doesn't really matter. So what do you want to actually look at? Do you want to see it yellow or do you want to see it green? That's your choice. That's up to you. I have decided I'm going to do a little bit of both. I'm going to my plane, as far as the landing gear bay, that's going to be yellow. Okay, all 3, the main gear and the rear one, that's going to be yellow. Under the cowling for the engine though, I'm going to do that green. I'm going to think, okay, so they wanted that one a little bit better coated because it's going to be a lot more further to wear and everything, and all the elements that's going to be in and around that. So they did they made sure there was a second coat on that, and they did that in green. So that's what that's my little story I'm making up. Of course, then you have the color of the cockpit, which was of course done in what they call interior green, which I'm going to be using this green for. So that's going to be my interior green. It's a little bit different than the green chromate. Kind of hard to tell on the camera. You'll just have to trust me. They are different pigments of green. So this is a chromate, and that's my interior green. Put that aside for now. Now, that being said, I also learned that a lot of the more, as time went on, They actually started doing the cockpit in black on top of that green, and so you get a lot of chipping away as the black paint got worn away, and you could see the green underneath of it. And I've seen that in a few reference photos where the cockpit's black, yet it's really worn, and you can see green as the black paint is chipped away. I've decided I'm going to do that with mine too. And speaking of chipping, I'm going to be doing some chipping effects on my airplane, especially in the cockpit. And this is going to be something new that I've never done. Although I've, in the past, you know, especially when I was younger, when I wanted to duplicate some kind of chipping effect or something like that, I'd have the color on there or whatever, and then I would take like a little sponge, like, let's see if I got one. I have a little piece of sponge here. Take a little piece of sponge like this, just some foam or whatever, rip a little chunk off, dip it in some silver paint or whatever, and then make sure it's mostly dry, and then you just kind of dab it. I'll just use this as reference. You just kind of dab it on the edge that you would want, along the sides or whatever, and that adds some random little touches and adds some chipping effect, right? And that's a quick and dirty way to do chipping effect. But if you want to look at it realistically, what is chipping? Well, yeah, let's say you have your layer of metal, okay, and that's that, and then you've got, say, some primer on top of that, and then you've got a coat of paint on top of that primer, maybe 2 coats of paint, a clear coat, that kind of stuff, right? And it's all building up layers. Now as that chips away, that's chipping down towards the metal, and if you get right down, your level of paint is actually going to go right down to the metal and then come back up as you get to your layers of paint again. Okay, now of course that's extreme magnification would really show that, but realistically that's what's happening. But by doing my chipping method like that, like I used to, I'm actually adding another layer of paint to it. So the chipping is actually reverse chipping, I guess you could say, maybe something like that. So it's not really that realistic. It's not actually chipping away at the paint. And so, yeah, from a few feet away it kind of looks okay, but it doesn't quite look realistic. It's just something a little off with it. And so if you watch enough YouTube videos of other modelers and stuff like that, and they've got these chipping effects, there's products out there that's actually called chipping fluid, that you put in between, you spray in between a couple of layers of paint, and that allows you to chip away that top layer of paint. Other guys use hairspray. Hairspray, of course, much cheaper, easier to use. You don't have to put it in a airbrush. You don't have to spray it. Well, you spray it, yeah, you do, but okay. So I'm just going to go with hairspray. So I've decided I'm going to do a test before I actually get to doing it on this model. I'm going to do a test. I've got my test mule here. There's an old F-15 here. I'm going to be testing this out. So I've already just sprayed a little bit of Mr. Surfacer Black down here, and then I sprayed some Tamiya TS30 silver on here, which is a nice good replica of, say, just bare aluminum. So I'm going to spray a little bit of paint on this. I'm going to spray some hairspray, and I'm going to spray some paint on there. I'm going to try it out, and I'm going to see how well I can do it. If it's nice and easy to do, I'm going to find out. But before I do that, we're going to assemble our 2 little engine pieces here. There's not really much to do. Going by the instructions, basically I've got everything installed right here. I got all this assembled. This is the oil tank, right? That's this, technically the oil tank, and then the bulkhead or firewall, whatever you want to call it. Oh, they actually call it firewall. How about that? That's assembled, and that's all painted and ready to go. We had assembled our little, I'm not sure what these 2 parts are on each side. Remember, we had those and I had to paint them. So I got the aluminum painted, and then I painted them gloss black based on some reference photos. It's kind of funny, you know, sometimes reference photos, the things are totally aluminum, and other photos, they're completely black, really glossy black. So I guess it all depends on where they got them from, whatever, and whatever they did with them. I went with half and half. It's got an aluminum piece there with the black, shiny black on top. That's what I went with, just to make it pop out a little bit, just so it's a little something different. Okay, so the next step is to assemble these. I've already got the little screw that Tamiya called out for. Let me show you in the overhead camera here. So I've already got the little screw that belongs to, so I'll just take that out. Okay. And then these two just go together like that. You just line up your two little pins, and in theory it goes together, yep, just like that. And then you put your screw in. So let's see if I can get that to hold. Sometimes these little screws are best if you use tweezers to get them lined up for their holes. Now, of course, the kit comes with a little screwdriver, but I'm going to use these because it's a little easier to handle. Got the sunlight on my desk, so I just make sure that's a little tight. Good enough. There we go. So that's our oil tank mated up against the back of our engine, just like that. All right, so that's done. Now, what I wanted to do, I wanted to kind of do a little bit of weathering on this before we go any further on it. I figure, okay, this is an oil tank. Surely they've spilled some oil on that, and considering this thing is purpose-built for war, they probably didn't do too great a job of cleaning up all the oil spillage, right? Who does? And then I also figured, you know, it's not going to be a brand new engine in this thing. This has probably seen a few missions. You know, it's been used, it's been flown quite a bit. After all, I am doing the Korean version, so this would have been flown by Dean Hess, who, if you know anything about him or you know anything about the Korean War, he's pretty famous for, he was in World War II, and after World War II, he was, you know, he was civilian, and then he was over in Japan, and they called him back into service for the Korean War from Japan over to South Korea, and he taught the South Koreans how to fly the P-51 Mustangs, or as time went on, they called the F-51 Mustangs. He taught them how to fly the Mustangs. And then he was also, again, famous for taking care of the orphans in South Korea and having them opening up or building an orphanage over in on Jeju Island, and became very famous for that. And yeah, so I saw in one article about it that in World War II he actually he accidentally bombed an orphanage in Germany or something like that. Don't quote me on that. I don't know if that's true, but it's possible that that is why he really had a mind for taking care of the orphans in South Korea. So yeah, anyway, that's enough history for now. So speaking of that, I want to do a little bit of weathering on that. So I figure some brown panel liner. This is just Tamiya panel and panel line accent color. This is brown. I figure that's going to be a good highlight for this yellow zinc chromate. So this stuff, of course, is really thin and also very easy to clean up after. Now, realistically, if you want to do this, you should do a clear coat over top of your paint first. Otherwise, this kind of gets absorbed into it. But I figure getting absorbed into this will be fine. So I want to add a little bit of this just around the edges, like this, to simulate a little bit of oil running down, maybe down on the side here too, just a little bit. You can do it right there. Maybe they had some spillage at one time. It spilled all the way down in there along the straps. Why not, right? Maybe accumulated down at the bottom, that kind of thing. Maybe just on the side row, settled into there, why not? And down on the edge, just like that. So, sorry, I did that with the wrong camera on. So, here's your idea of my little oil spillage going down there. Just to add a little something to it, make it a little, you know, it's not brand new. It's not brand new. Gives you something to, extra little feature to go by, little something something, right? So that's that. Now for the engine, I think picking maybe fuel stains, that might be a good color to use. It kind of will simulate kind of a rusty color. These things, these AK washes, and they really they got a lot of pigment in them that tends to collect at the bottom, which is why I put a little stainless steel nut in the jar, just to make sure they really gets mixed up right. Okay, there we go. Okay, let's move this out of my way here. So, grab a brush, and even though this is fuel stains, we don't have to really, this is going over top of black, so it doesn't really matter. This is just going to add a little bit of pigment to our engine, doing a few spots all around. Especially maybe down around here at the bottom. When this dries, it won't look so reddish because it's kind of will absorb into the paint, into the black a little bit. And at the end of the day, it's not really going to look that much different. Maybe here or there, but not really. It will show the most over the bolts that I've highlighted silver, right? But other than that, it's not going to show very much. So as you can see, it just, you can tell by all the little glossy areas, that's where I've applied it, but not really anywhere else. I could do maybe a spot or two under here. Maybe I'll just do that, kind of wash it right across there. Maybe these top bolts saw a little bit of rust. But that's it. And good enough. And that's it. Just so that the engine doesn't quite look so pristine. And I could go with another one. This one is Engine Grime. It's a little bit darker. This is more of a really dark brown color. I could mix it with that. Maybe where the oil filter is, I could try that out a little bit there. So to clean off my brush a little bit, just so it's not so saturated with the fuel stains. And this one, of course, is going to be a darker color, but again, we're doing it against a black engine, so it's not really going to be noticeable. It's just going to be subtle. And of course, you know, see, this is a much darker brown, right? And so I'll just do it all around, kind of where the oil filter is here. I think that's the oil filter anyway. And yeah, but we're not going to do it in a lot of places, just the odd little dab here or there. So there we go. Good enough, I think. There we go. So we're going to let that dry for a long time. The next step in our build process on the next page is now starting to work on the instrument cluster. But before we get to that, I want to show you guys the other thing I was working on during the week since the last episode was the wings. Okay. I remember when I first, in part one, I decided, I wanted to fill in the panel lines on the forward edge of the wings, and I was going to use a putty. I was going to use this stuff here, right? I was going to use the glazing putty, and I opted out of that because I figured it would be a little too hard to get the putty in exactly where I wanted it without accidentally filling it in and sanding on details that I didn't want to. So I decided, I'll just leave it. But then, as I started thinking about it more, I thought, you know what? I have this stuff here. This is Mr. Surfacer 500. Okay, this is primer, but it's thicker, right? It's a much thicker primer. So I decided, I remember some people using this stuff to fill in minor little cracks and gaps and stuff like that. You can paint it on and just let it dry. You can layer it up nicely. And I thought, maybe I'll try that. And so I did. And so after about 2, 3, 4 coats or so, I have filled in our panel lines along in here where they're supposed to be. Now, I will say it's about 95%. They're not 100% filled in. So I'll try and show you on the camera here. You might still see some of my Sharpie lines, like right along here. You might be able to see it still. I can see it, but maybe the camera's not picking it up. But there's not really, there's not much. I can see if I reflect the light on it right, I can still see there's a little panel line right there. But that's about it. This side, the top side's really nice and smooth and good. It's going to be very, very hard to determine. You can really see this. Well, I can see this line here. If I get in the right light, you can see how the panel line goes along here and then it just stops, right? And that's perfect. It just stops there, and that's exactly what we're going for, right? This is all supposed to be bondoed in. That's what they would have done. They bondoed this whole panel and remove all rivets and panel lines and make that smooth, just like you would your car. And so I've got similar situation here on this side, where I've got it all nice and smooth, and it's looking pretty good. Okay, on the underside of the wing, I figured, okay, I don't need to worry about it as much. I still wanted to do it, but not nearly as precise, because it's going to be the underside of the wing, and I don't care so much. It's not going to be seen, right? So I do have this side. Now the bottom was a little bit harder to fill in because there's just more, and there's a lot of rivet detail that was on the bottom, especially in this little area. There's tons of little rivets. So I filled all those in. I left this one little divot here that's right behind the shell extraction holes. But yeah, other than that, it's pretty much filled in 95%. I cannot feel the lines, it's just I can see them sometimes. So yeah, I wound up actually doing that, and so I got that done. And so yeah, okay, that's enough rambling. Let's move on to actually putting this thing together. So we have the engine complete, and so we're going to flip the page. And so this is now, we're getting into our cockpit. So we got our instrument panel. Now, remember, on the instrument panel, I have my Red Fox Studios gauges. Oops. I got my Red Fox Studios gauges right here. Okay. So these guys have to go in on a flat surface, though. So let's find our pieces that we actually need here. So we need, off of the D tree, we need our D tree. Okay? D tree. D. Where's my D? Where's my D? D. D. Found my D almost right away. Let me put this here. D. Sometimes when I got the sprue upside down, I'm not sure what sprue it is. So try and remember. Okay, so I'm guessing that we have two different options for instrument panels, whether you're building the F-51D or if you're doing a P-51, pick a letter, K, something like that. I don't know. For this particular one, we want D31, which is this one here. So let's get this off of the sprue. Okay, D31. Now, we're supposed to put a decal in on behind the clear part. L16, I believe, is going to be clear, but we're not doing that, right? It's going to be useless for us. So, this is our part. Let me just clean it up here. Clean up our little nubs. Okay, so as you can see, Red Fox Studios, you can buy these things at a few different online stores. Just look for the Red Fox Studios, whatever, just Google Red Fox Studio and then whatever plane you're looking for, and you'll probably find it. Okay, so let's open up our little baggie. Okay, so as you can tell, this obviously is going to go on here, but we've got some nice little molded texture that Tamiya has done for us to give us some nice realism on this, if you were to just paint this, right? But we're not. I'm going to be adding this, so all of this needs to be gone. We've got to get rid of all this nice molded detail. Okay, it feels a little wrong, but in the end, it's good. And you'll see, because I could not paint these properly. To get in there, it just wouldn't look good. So I've got a little metal file here, and so I'll just carefully file all this down till it's smooth. Now if you want, you could hit this with a little coat of primer to help you know when to stop filing, especially if you got a certain area on your particular instrument panel on whatever kit you're building and you're supposed to actually leave some, right? Sometimes there's some detail that the Red Fox Studios panel does not replace. And so you want to preserve that. We've got this little piece here needs to go too. So I'm going to use my knife to get rid of that one. There we go. Like I said, doing this feels kind of wrong, especially if you've got some really crisp molding lines and it looks really nice. It can feel like this, like what is the point of that? Just destroying all the nice molding. It can feel like you're just ruining your kit. And in a sense you are getting rid of all the detail that they went through the trouble of sculpting and molding for you, and you're just filing it away. So that feels pretty smooth. Of course, all the holes are still there, but that's all right. It looks like we've got now a nice flat surface, or pretty close to a flat surface anyway. So make sure. Make sure I got that guy gone. Alright. That's a nice surface. Let's get that a little white. Okay. Nice flat surface for us to work with. The other thing we need to do is on D48, D48 is supposed to go in here, but D48 has a piece that's going to go on it also. So let's take a look at D48. D48, there's 45, 6, 8. Oh, look at that, D48, 9, and 50 are all look like the same thing, but we want 48. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, because even if I accidentally screw this one up for some reason, I've got two others that I just filed down to be the exact same. Now that makes it a little bit harder to get ones like this when they're small, because you know you got to manipulate it in between your fingers, like this. Again, all we've got to do is get it so it's smooth and flat. There we go. That's done. Metal file really makes short work of it. Okay. So this piece is supposed to go right there. Like that. Sort of. Like that. Okay. That's where that's going to go. But we have this down here. We got this part here and here. So I don't know, do I actually have something to go there? So let's look at our instructions. Red Fox Studios gives you nice detailed instructions. This is just the card of what comes in it. But we get instructions on where each piece goes. Okay? And they even show you, there's our main piece here, and then we've got this piece, and we actually have these pieces right here. It shows you the call out D31, that's this piece, that's this, D31, right? D48, boom, that's that guy, right? So they show us number 3 and number 5 on our sticker sheet. They show on the sticker sheet, I think they call it out. No, they don't. Oh, they do. On here, they show us number 3 and number 5. That's what they look like. So I know that's this one here and this one here are going to go on these two spots, which means I need to file those as well. Okay, but number 4 actually goes in the middle, so I got to file that down. So 3, 4, and 5 right there, boom, boom, and boom, all in the middle. E-Place, hey, how's it going? So I need to file all 3 of these down. They're all different angled surfaces, so I just need to be a little careful with my file and file those down. Get this filed flat, because we need a flat surface for these things to stick to. I'm sorry if my hands are getting in the way and you can't really see what I'm doing. These other pieces, these other sides, I need to actually use my knife to get in there, because they're a little bit It's just I'm not going to be able to get in there with the file. Cut that little knob off. You made a hurricane, but you haven't painted it yet. I'll send it to you on Instagram. Well, thank you very much. That'll be cool to see. Let's get rid of that little detail. Okay, I want to compare the height of that. Yep, so I got to get rid of that little lever. That's actually supposed to be a lever. This, I believe, is the emergency landing gear release handle, if I remember. I just watched a video yesterday on all these different controls in the Mustang planes and what each one does. It's quite the informative video on every single control inside the cockpit and what it does, every button, every lever. Alrighty, please, we'll have a good time and we'll see you later. Okay, so our surface is ready, but let's refer back to our thing. This is supposed to be black. Okay, so if I put these on here now and then, you know, how I gotta paint it. So why don't I just paint it first? Or at least hit it with some Mr. Surfacer anyway, right? Let's get that done. At least get some Mr. Surfacer on there so that we don't have to worry about it later. Let's see, you're gonna hold on for me? That should go right. There we go. Now, I think before I actually paint it, I'm going to glue this guy on. Might as well. Glue that on. He goes right there. Okay, so that's glued on now. So, there we go. My Mr. Surfacer 1500 black. And let's give this a little coat of paint. Okay, this is now thoroughly black. Let that dry for a minute. So, you might be thinking, okay, well, if you're just going to glue something on here, why did you paint it? Well, I need to get around all those edges and everything where my little piece is not going to be applied. So, I want to get that all painted, especially on the back and everything, and get all the sides and all that, blah, 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 and get that all painted. Once this is dry, yeah, I'll take a little bit and I'll wipe it away or whatever, rub it off. I'll rub it out and yeah. Okay, we have our little bulkhead or whatever that's right behind the instrument cluster, and that needs to be painted in the chromate. So they're calling for chromate there, which is, well, kind of weird. You know, Tamiya's calling for chromate all in the interior stuff. Chromate everywhere in the cockpit. But we already know you're not supposed to have chromate in the cockpit. So instead of chromate, I'm going to be painting that my interior green. And so I will paint that with this instead of chromate. So fire up my air compressor and get this Mr. Color ready to go. So what piece is that? That's D45 and 46. So let's get these off of here. It's 45 and 46 are the pedals. Now you can go crazy and go, I really want to have this detailed and have this really crazy detailed cockpit, and it could do the actual chipping and scuffing that you would see on the pedals. So that leads to the question, just how much are you going to see, right? How much of that are you going to see? So this is actually going to sit like this. I'll show you that on camera. Our pedals go into this little slot there, just like that. Okay. Now, choice. Paint it first and then glue them, or just glue it together and paint it as one unit. It's not going to make that much difference, really, except getting in behind the pedals. But do you ever see behind the pedals? Once the cockpit's all assembled, you're going to see this kind of an angle like this. Like, seriously, that's roughly the angle you're going to be able to see the pedals at. Something like that, right? And that's it. You're never going to see behind them. So does it matter? No. But painting the paneling behind it, that might be a different story. And of course, I haven't primed any of this stuff, right? I haven't put any primer on it. For this stuff, I do want to primer it. And I'm just going to primer, I'm going to use my 1500 gray. Basically for anything that's not going to have anything that's not going to be painted silver, I'm going to primer it with the gray. When I am going to do silver, I'm going to primer it in the black. Silver just pops a lot better with black behind it, right? So let's just do a quick little coat primer on this. There we go. Now, a long time ago, I never used to use primer. I just didn't really see that much of a need for it when it came to plastic model kits. Almost never primed a surface, especially when it was doing something like, say, the interior of a car or something like that. Never once primered it first. Just in the last couple of years, though, I have learned the value of primering things first. It gives the paint a really good surface to stick to. Primer just has better, well, I guess they call it adhesion properties. I'd call it stickiness. Primer sticks to the surface better than regular paint does. And that's just the bottom line. Our little instrument panel that you can barely see because of my dark blue shirt is now dry. And so we're going to go back to this little guy while this primer thing is drying. Okay, so kind of jumping around here from one to the other. Okay, so we have our little panel. Okay, now where this has to glue down, I am going to kind of get rid of some of this primer that I put on here, and let's just use the edge of my file to kind of scrape away at it and get rid of our paint. By doing this, the glue will actually be sticking to the plastic and not just trying to stick to the coat of paint on there. Okay. Also, this gives us a good idea of just how flat it, or not flat, it was. Okay, so now I've cleaned that off a little bit. We're just about ready for glue. So you have to use CA glue for this stuff. So you can just bend the cardboard back and peel it off, or you can just grab your hobby knife and just kind of go underneath, and eventually it will come off of the cardboard. There we go, just like that. These things are not sticky, they don't stick by themselves. Okay, and here's a good thing. I've just realized this, as I feel it, is not completely flat. If you do that, you can see underneath of it, it's not completely flat. It's not completely flat. Now that doesn't mean you can press down on it and then the glue won't hold it, because it will. Although these things don't really want to be bent, you can bend them just ever so slightly, and I mean slightly, and they'll be okay, right? So that, don't panic if you get one that's not quite flat like mine. So CA glue, I just use this thin stuff. You can use thicker stuff, it doesn't really matter. So put that there, get my handy dandy applicator, and we're going to put a bunch of glue on here. So I just dab in here and put a bunch of blobs around. Until you've got enough where you're going to be happy that it's going to actually hold very well. If you don't put enough glue, it won't hold. You'll be working with it and all of a sudden the piece will just come off. Right? So my thing is to put enough around it everywhere that I can. Especially on the edges where I know it's going to stick. I want enough glue that it's going to be happy in its home. I think I got enough on here now that once I put it on, it's going to be staying there. Okay? Which is yet another thing. You don't really get a lot of playing time with CA glue. Once you've put it on, you better be sure that's where you want it. So I'm just going to press down and hold that for a sec. Didn't hold. Now one advantage we have is it's got holes in the back. So if you didn't quite get enough, or you're afraid you didn't get enough, you can actually put some through the back, which is exactly what I'm going to be doing here. Couple of spots just to add a little more. I'm pretty sure I didn't get very much down on this side, so let's see if I can get some through these holes. There we go. That felt good. thing with CA glue that's different than normal hobby glue is normal hobby glue actually melts the two pieces of plastic together, and that's where you get the bond from. That's how they stick together. You're literally kind of welding the plastic together. And we have an actual perfect set. Okay, that's that. Next piece, we get the big one in the middle. Well, sorry, the second biggest one in the middle. Bend this just a little bit so I get my knife under it. There we go. Pardon me. Okay. Next. Now, what did I forget to do? I forgot to get rid of the paint on this one. So this would be a good test to see how well it's going to stick. Like I mentioned before, you don't get a lot of play time with CA glue. So if you get it crooked, you're kind of screwed. I almost got that one crooked, but it looks okay. Next, we'll do our little tiny guy here. Let's get him off of there. And actually, while I'm doing this, I'm going to get all three of these guys off of here. There's that one and that one. Okay. These small guys are a little trickier. Because they're small. Sorry if I'm just showing you my big head, but I need to kind of get in here so that I can see these. That one. That one. And finally, we'll get our one in the middle. If I can pick it up. I guess that's the beauty of these pieces, is they actually are 3D and you can actually pick it up. There we go. All of our pieces in. And I'll show you the finished product here nice up close for you. And this, my friends, is 10 times more detailed and accurate compared to what I could ever paint. Even the lenses look nice and like it's glass. Our buttons are nicely sculpted and levers are sticking out just like they should be. Just like that. Yeah. That's way better than I could ever paint. I'll tell you what. Okay. So, we'll leave that to dry for a minute. And like I said before, I like to just soak up the last of my CA glue out of those things so I don't get a big layer of it in there. And then I can use that next time. Okay, so I'll change back to this because you don't need to see anything super close up right now as I get ready to paint some interior green. I don't know how thick this stuff is, if it needs to be thinned. I actually don't spray paint Mr. Hobby Color, or this is Mr. Color by Mr. Hobby. I don't spray paint this stuff. I think this is already thinned. It's been a long time since I painted with this stuff. It looks pretty thin already, so I knocked over my test mule. That's okay. So she's ready to go. Let's put some paint in her. Don't need a lot. I'm only painting a couple of pieces here. One thing I will say, the difference between Tamiya paint and the Mr. Color. Mr. Color stinks. It's really got quite the smell to it compared to Tamiya paints. Okay, so let's just lay down a little bit of green on there. I'd say, yeah, it is a little bit thicker than what I would normally thin it to, but that's okay. It's spraying all right. I just got to pull back on my trigger a little more than I would normally. That's all. There we go. Our petals are done. Let's put those there. I'll do this guy now. It's kind of ironic. I've just discovered that I didn't clean my brush properly last time I painted. So my brush is sticking open a little bit. Doesn't want to return to the off position, which is okay. It's not a big deal because it's not spraying paint out, it's just air. I know, guys, I know. Normally I change the camera so you can watch me paint, but this is just a little piece here I'm only doing just to get this done so I can move on to the next piece. So there we go. There's our other green piece. Okay. So, you guys watching me live, you guys get to watch me clean my airbrush, and you guys who are watching on YouTube, I'll skip this ahead for you so you don't have to watch me. Okay, so brush is clean, which given that time it took to do that, that allowed this to dry. So that's dry. Dink. And doink. Okay, so we can now glue this in there where it belongs. Okay, I'll show you on the camera here. So our pedals are going to go right there. Doink. Just like that. Okay. So a little bit of glue on here. Our little tab. And put it in there. Oops. Good thing our instrument panel is going to be going right here, right? We've got tabs on the back here to help line it up. And so it should line up and fit in. Doesn't seem to want to. Oh, there we go. So it sits just like that. No, it doesn't. It doesn't want to line up. There we go. We got it in. That's how it sits. Let's just make sure I'm not missing any other pieces. Looks like that's all it. Yep. One thing I did forget to do, even though I highlighted it, there's a little nub on the back of this piece, this one here. There's a little nub on the back. I forgot to trim that off. And because I didn't trim it off, it's not quite sitting flush against here on the bottom. It's not quite flush, but it's so minor that you're never going to notice it. Never going to notice. Anyway, let's glue our panel on. There we go. So, one thing I can do, since I am just, it bugs me just a little bit, I do want to put a little bit of weathering on that. So I'm going to show you guys how I used to do that. I'll show you guys how I would do weathering, especially in the past, okay? Speaking of a little sponge, okay, so I got a little piece of foam here. It's just like, I don't know, foam you might find from like maybe an inside of a TV box or something like that, right? That kind of foam. So I just ripped off a little tiny piece, make sure it's not too, you don't want it perfectly done. I take my tweezers and I take my alligator clip and do that, and just hold on to it like that. And then I take some paint. So I want something shiny. I'm going to use Tamiya's X11 Chrome Silver. So let's mix this up and get some silver action going. Okay. Just make sure it's nice and shaken up well. Okay. And then what you're going to do, I got my paper towel handy. Okay, I'll show you. Okay, so sponge. I'm going to take this. I'm just going to dip it in the paint here. Okay, and I'm going to get most of it off. Okay, keep on dabbing until it's almost not showing anything. You want to do a test on something? Sure, I'll test this. Okay, looks all right. Now we're going to go here. very lightly, do a little test dab. Looks good. Now as you do this, it is drying on the sponge, right? That's okay. Now, it's kind of too big to get into the actual pedal, right? So we want to narrow that a little bit. So I'm going to do this, squeeze it a little more. I want to get in that pedal. See, I pressed a little too hard, and so it basically just made a big blotch. But that's okay, we can repair that. But there you go. Right? We now have weathered pedals. Now, you don't like it, you've done too much, you've gone and screwed it up, that's perfectly alright. Because you can always touch up with your original paint. Right? You can go back over with this. And so what I want to do is get another piece of sponge, maybe just a little bit small or a little bit of a tip. Something that I can be a little more precise with. Let's dip that in there. Okay, get a little bit of that off of there. And let's try, now we're going to go over and get rid of those big splotches. And now it's not quite so in your face. Right? And there we go. And that's all there is to it. It's quick, it's easy, it's not the best way, but it works. Right? That's the main thing. It works. And there's our pedals. They're warm, and that's the main thing. Now you could do other things like add some dirt, you know. Pilots are getting, especially in South Korea, you know, they didn't exactly have concrete runways or asphalt there. They were all landing on mud, dirty runways. And so pilots are all walking around in the mud, they get in the plane, guess what? You're going to get mud on the pedals. So you can add mud there. You can do a little bit of mud effects if you want. You can do anything, all kinds of stuff. I could add something like streaking grime. That would work. Add just a touch or two of that. Get my paint shaken up here. Okay. And I'm going to grab a very tiny brush, a small brush, and we're going to add just a little bit of this stuff. Just a little bit. Okay. And maybe just a little couple of little bit on that bottom edge where his heel might sit. The heel of his boot would be right along in there. There we go. Now we've got dirty pedals that look like they've been used. Dirty pedals that look like they've been used. Just like that. And so, when you're looking at this thing, if you happen to go over to your shelf or whatever, your display case, and you look and you're kind of looking down in the cockpit of this thing, you'll be happy to know the pedals actually had got a little bit of detail on them instead of just plain green brand new pedals and never been on a plane's never been flown, although it looks like everywhere else it's pretty old and worn out and used, right? It's that little level of detail that you know you did it, and you think it looks good. Well, you think it looks good because you did it, right? Okay, let's move on to the thing that I was talking about at the beginning of this. Chipping, hairspray. As I mentioned before, I've got the silver paint on there, and I'm going to be using this stuff. Tresemme. This stuff is the Tres 2 Ultra Fine Mist. Okay, now I've seen it recommended before, and so I went and bought this stuff. Yeah, it feels kind of weird going into the hair part of this drugstore. So this is Firm Control number 3. That's the one I'm using. Okay, and so we're just going to spray it on here like this. It's nice and wet. It's easy to see. Okay, we're going to give that. Whew, smells like hairspray. Gee, I wonder why it all smells like hairspray, right? Okay, so I'm going to give that a minute or 5 to dry, right? So hairspray takes some time. And what am I going to use? So I'm going to try using, what am I going to paint over it? Let's try, I'll try the green chromate. And we'll see how well this stuff chips. Now, you do want to give the hairspray enough time to dry a little bit, at least from what I've seen. Exactly how much time, I don't know. It already looks like it's almost dry. There's a little bit of spray there that looks like it's still wet. Yeah, so maybe another minute or 2 will be enough for it to dry. While I'm letting that dry, I'm going to put the rest of my cockpit parts back in their little bag, so that they are protected. And all in one place, so I don't lose anything. Okay. All right. So let's get my needle back in my air gun. So I'm not going to be able to spray anything. It's mostly dry, but not quite right here. Use my air gun. Help this dry a little bit. Be interesting to see what would be the effect. What would the effect be if I did spray over wet hairspray? That would be interesting to find out. I think we're a good 90% dry. This is just a test anyway, so I don't think it's really going to make much difference either way. It's all about just testing what it's like when you try and chip. Right? That's all I'm doing this for. Just test before I get on to actually doing it on the real kit. And at least then I'll have a better idea of what I'm doing, or how to do it anyway. Learn from mistakes, right? So this is a little bit thick. I should have thinned it first, but I don't think it's for this purpose it doesn't matter. Okay, got a decent coat on there. Okay, it's green now. It did not. This stuff did not like. I had the trigger pulled back all the way, 100%, in order to get this stuff to spray. So, yeah, Mr. Color definitely needs to be thinned. So now the question is, how do you get this to chip, right? Well, this is dry to the touch now. It's very dry, but that's interesting. Just rubbing it. It's coming off. That's not exactly the effect I want. That's interesting. Just rub it like that. That's not what I want to do, right? And maybe that's why they say to wait 10 to 15 minutes. But what you don't want to do, basically, you want to get some water, and you want to get either an old brush that you've trimmed down to almost nothing, or you can buy like these purpose brushes. These happen to be Mr. Hobby weathering brushes. Okay, I got the hard set because, you know, I like it hard. These are just they're really stiff bristles, right? And so it allows you to do different effects with them. You need to get some water, which is what I'm going to get right now. I'll be back in a moment. Okay, so now I've got some water. The idea is you take a soft brush and you wet it, okay, which kind of reactivates the hairspray underneath of it, underneath the paint. And then once the hairspray is reactivated, you can start chipping away at it. Now, based on what's happened here, I don't think I'm going to need to do that, okay, because just wiping it, I'm able to remove this and actually get some green on my finger. And if I use my cloth, I can wipe that paint right off, right? So I don't want to do that. You can kind of see the graininess. So what I wanted to try doing is maybe around these edges here, where we've got some detail, or maybe along the edge of this, I wanted to try doing some chipping. So let's just see what happens if I dip my brush into the water and just kind of go along this edge, kind of. Well, I'm definitely getting chipping. Seeing how much or how little I can do with it. Definitely working. It definitely works. Give it that. So a little bit of practice and a little fine tuning, and I think I could get it. It definitely works. Maybe I should actually wait longer with the hairspray, because I feel like this stiff brush is not really necessary. Let's try the little bit longer brush, and I'll try in the middle here. Oh, look at that. Just, I could literally just, it really didn't stick at all. So I want to let this sit for a while. So I could basically I can replicate a lot of wear like that. As much as I wanted. You go all the way around this edge and simulate wear on that panel. As much or as little as I want. It is kind of, the water does help get right through the layer down to the base color underneath. Where I didn't use water, like here, it's a little bit more not going quite down. But if I, using the water, it gets me more through. And of course I use too much water there, but the water helps you get right through to the base color easier. But yeah, it's I want to try again. I'm gonna leave this and let this sit for a long time and let that cure, maybe a day. Maybe I'll come back to it tomorrow and see. Because, well, it definitely works. We'll give it that. What I want to do is wait and see once this cures. I'm going to give it a day and see how tough the paint becomes. If the paint still stays super fragile or what. Maybe, see, I've seen, if you want to protect this now, put a clear coat over it, right? Put a clear coat over that, and then you can continue, and so you can have multiple layers of chipping, which is what I kind of want to do, right? Especially inside the cockpit, where you've got black paint over green paint over yellow chromate over aluminum, right? I kind of want to work at that and see how good or how bad I can replicate that. So yeah, anyway, that's about it. I'm gonna let this sit for a day or so, and I'll try again tomorrow, work on that some more tomorrow. So that is where I'm gonna leave it today, guys, and I want to thank you guys for coming out. Thanks for watching, and like I said, that's gonna be it. Hit that like button down below and subscribe also if you haven't already, and check out my Instagram if you feel like doing that. There'll be links down below. So that's where I'm going to leave it today, and I guess that'll be it then, and then we'll see you guys all in the next one.